And the real Roman asking, if you weren't a doctor, which career would you have chosen and why? What is the one thing you love and don't love about being a doctor? And lastly, what is a normal day like for Dr. T? So if I wasn't a doctor, I really don't know what I would have become. Maybe a teacher. Yeah, maybe a teacher. And I'll be honest with you, I think my earliest memory is at 8 years old, where I remember, that what do you want to do when you grow up? All of us get asked that. I'm like, doctor. And it's always been that. Even in high school, my teachers used to be so annoyed with me because I'd be so boring. Every single time in career guidance, my answer was the same. Doctor. And my mom has actually a fascinating story about how when I was little, I used to spend so much time in the first aid aisle, buying first aid and replenishing my first aid kit versus being in the toys aisle. So I think I've always wanted to be a doctor. I love everything about being a doctor. I think I may have answered this as well in terms of what inspires me. The fact that my passion for sexual and reproductive health rights doesn't feel like work. It feels like a part of a higher purpose and a passion. What I don't love about being a doctor? I love it. I love being a doctor. A normal day for me, I don't really have a normal day. No 2 days are ever the same. Some days, especially now, I spend like all day, every day, after one Zoom meeting, after another meeting, doing interviews, writing, and also learning and relaxing. And so my time zone is like literally anywhere from like, let's say, so I've got a lot of friends and colleagues in India, right? And I've got people in Washington and New York, which is like Eastern time. But sometimes I have people in LA. And to try and coordinate all of these time zones for like a meeting, sometimes can literally take the whole day. So sometimes all I do in a day is successfully show up for like a 10 o'clock at night meeting. And that's like what I've accomplished that day. Komani Yamgela says, what is your opinion on sex addiction? Do you believe it can be one's diagnosis despite it excluded in the DSM-5? So Koman, I think this is part of the good discussion about thought leadership and scholarship, right? Especially around SRHR. We know that especially in terms of mental health, a lot of symptoms overlap with other mental health issues, and it won't be possible in this video to talk about the details of it, but I do think that firstly, if you think that you have an addiction problem, whatever addiction problem is, you need to seek relevant medical professional. Addiction by default means that you are using something as a means of either survival or coping from something else. So what is the root cause? So we need to always be thinking about root cause, because even if it's mental health, even if symptoms are shared between different syndromes and spectrums, it is still important to not just deal with the presenting symptom, perhaps that a patient has self-diagnosed, but to go deeper into the root. And that's why therapy is important. Therapy is not a once-off thing where you go for a diagnosis and that's it. It's maintained throughout, because often a person may self-diagnose as an addict of anything. Meanwhile, the cause and the underlying issues may drive us or point us in a different direction. So it's very important, whatever addiction you think you have, please seek medical assistance. That's what I will say about that one. Samantha, how do you feel about being the ambassador as a girl from Qwaqwa? Were you thinking, I think you're ambassador your life here, how to me, because you just love me too much. I'm not an ambassador for anything or anyone, but definitely I'll remind you guys, anyone, I will always remind you. Finish and clar. Pumelele N is asking, how did you come up with your son's name? It's so beautiful. Thank you. And it's actually there's a story behind it, but the short version is that I was in high school, and I went to Epworth School for Girls for some time. And while I was at Epworth, one of my friends and other schoolmates, her name was Bukosi. We used to call her Bukosi for short. And one day we're just talking. I don't even know what we're talking about. And I was like, no, my friend, tell me, what is your full name? Because I feel like there's more to your name than just Ubukhosi. And she says to me, my name is Bukhosi Bemvelo. And from that day, I fell in love with that name. And I say to her, one day when I have a child, I'm gonna name them Bukhosi Bemvelo. And I was having this discussion, no Bukhosi, at airport school in 1996, if you can believe it. And my son was born in 2014, and that's what it was. It was then Ubukhosi Bemvelo, and I absolutely loved that name. And again, another video for another day, but I do talk about my journey to having a child and all of the different gynecological and fertility related issues and concerns and all of that. And funny enough, that name, after having gone through all of that, is just I can't think of a more perfect name. Ubukhosi Bemvelo, so that's his name, and it's a cheeky little one, but yeah, that's his name. And then okay, so Pumlele has another question. Says, how did you learn about all you know about sex? Was it through formal training, a personal journey, or both? So it was both, right? It was both a personal journey, because I am myself that young person who needs that book. So everything that I do, I'm not doing it for other people. I'm the beneficiary first. And that book, I wish I had it growing up. As much as my mom was amazing, she still is amazing. She still continues to teach me about my body and vagina and how everything works. But I still wish I had the book that I could go to and read and reference, that uses the slang that I understood, references that I understood, that made sense to me. Bo Robin Riding Hood, the unicorn. Later on you figure them out, but I had wished that as a child I'd had a book that uses references that I knew. And of course, being a medical doctor and then choosing to focus on sexual and reproductive health and rights is important, because I took about 12 years before I wrote the book, after having done the work. And it was important for me to be a student, to learn first and then write a book, and not write a book and then learn. No, I had to learn, I had to be a student, and I'm a perpetual student, and then write this book. And the book was the way that it was because of what women were asking me, what young people were asking me, and so in a way it's my answer back to all of the questions that I've received. And then another one, I don't know how to say this handle, NK_92_extension 2, Free Spirit Me, that's the name. Just wanted to thank you for your book. Has really changed my sex life for real. I've learned to speak about what I want, and also to understand that as a woman I too deserve to enjoy sex, and it's my responsibility to demand amazing sex from my partner. So that's beautiful. And Poppy SG says knowledge is power, 100%. Irene, how long does it take a VJJ? VJJ ki ing, Irene? Write it down. It's a vagina. You see, VJJ ki ing. So she's asking, how long does it take a vagina to go back to its normal size way after having gave birth? So you're using a lot of like YOJ had sex. I don't know what that means. See, this is why I say you guys must write properly so that we know. How long does it take a vagina to go back to its normal size after giving birth? That's the part that I can make out. And it takes a while, because remember, your vagina is a muscle, right, that stretches. It's naturally designed to stretch. That's why you can fit in a finger, you can fit in a condom, an internal condom, you can fit in a tampon, and a whole baby's head can come out. 1 baby's head, 2 baby's head, 3 baby's heads can come out of a vagina. So it's designed to stretch. And so we always say that, remember, postpartum, which is that period after you give birth, is 6 weeks. So you give your body time to just find itself again. Remember, you had a lot of retention when you were pregnant, so even your nose is swollen, your legs are swollen. So you need to give yourself time for the hormones to stabilize. There's a lot of like hormonal flushing that happens because now this other extra human is now out of your body, right? So it takes time. And I talk about it in the book, that the rush to start having sex again may also just be another layer of pressure that you are dealing with, and that's why we need, however your partnership looks, whether you are in a partnership with a man, another woman, surrogacy, whatever it is, that you allow your body to just go through what it needs to go through. Being pregnant and then giving birth is a major issue. It's not just a simple thing like whatever, it's a big deal. And I write about this in the book, about how your body changes, your hormones change, even your mental health. We talk about baby blues. There's so much going on when you give birth. And just allow yourself to take the time for your body. And then at Munimang asks if sexual disorder induced by hormones can be curable, and I think we went into detail a little bit about this, but basically, if you are taking a hormonal therapy for any indication, hormones, like other medication, do have certain side effects or can affect you differently. And yes, with a combined oral contraceptive pill and other types of contraceptive pills and injectables, you can expect some change in your libido, your desire, your dryness in the vagina. All of those can be affected by hormonal contraception. It's about being honest with your doctor or your nurse to say, look, for me, these are the things that I'm concerned about. If you experience vaginal dryness, if you experience a decrease in libido, let them know and tell them how you want all of those things improved. And sometimes it may be as simple as incorporating a lubricant, right? And not necessarily having to change your hormonal contraceptives. It really just depends on what you need, but have those discussions with them. The other one, another book. Yes, the book will come. The book will come, I promise. Kilebukhile CK is asking also about another book. The book will come. I must just decide, am I doing a book for teenagers? Am I doing a book for parents? What kind of a book must I do? But the book is coming for sure. Ooh-wee. Annelile is asking, is squirting pee? No, squirting isn't pee. All right. Remember, there's a lot of research that, in terms of women's health and sexual pleasure particularly, that still needs to happen, in my opinion anyway. I still don't think there's enough in terms of research around, women's sexual pleasure. But definitely what we know is that squirting isn't pee. Squirting is water that's released from the glands around your vulva, and some people can squirt almost every time. Some people squirt once in a lifetime. Some people never squirt. So squirting, if you really just having sex to squirt, you may be disappointed, but it's definitely not pee. And vaginal steaming, no, I wouldn't recommend anything that has not been scientifically proven to work. And I in fact have seen some of the adverse effects of steaming. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it as a medical doctor, but there are other people who recommend it. And I think it's just for all of us to stay in our lanes. Yeah. And Ntozake is saying, congratulations on the book and everything else. What are your primary goals as the new appointed UN Special Rapporteur on the right to health? So mine is very simple. As Special Rapporteur is to talk about vulnerability as part of the human rights experience and as a valid human experience, and that member states, and encourage them and urge them to center restoration of dignity in all of their programming, in their policy work, in legal reform, in issues of access, right? And also encourage and advise the other UN bodies in how they can incorporate the values of respect for vulnerability, as well as restoration of dignity. That would be my success if I can do that well. Sipe Mjila says, what keeps you going during hard times? I think it's knowing that I'm not alone in whatever hard time I am, to know that there were women before me who experienced hard times, and that there will be women after me who need me to not dwell in the low moments too long, because there's a lot of work to be done. So I think for me, I acknowledge when I'm going through a hard time, I think, which is a good habit, but then I also when I can pay attention to it for a long time, I do so. I've got a loving inner circle, close friends, and I speak and I tell people when I'm needing assistance. And yeah, I think that's how I deal with low moments. And I'm also very lucky, I think, that I am able to separate individual failure and individual issues or individual deficiencies versus when system or structures fail me. I'm able to clearly be like, well, when at this one, I know that it's a failure, but this is a system failure, or it's a structural failure, or it's a problem of sexism or misogyny embedded in a system. And as part of my activism, reject this idea that I will internalize everything as an individual failure. So I think I'm one of those people who truly live their politics, you know. When I like I and I'll be the first to tell you mona ki flopile, and I think my honesty, you know, is what I suppose, you know, makes it easy for people to come and be there for me, because I'm able to say, guys, flop, or how do we fix this? But I also am very aware that a lot of the flop, but there's other forces, other structures, other things that were meant to be in the system, that were meant to be in place for me to thrive. And so my thriving or my lack of thriving in some instances are not an indication of me as a person, of a personal deficiency. And then so Ndumiso says, so after seeing the trauma of the normal vaginal delivery, she says she's pro normal vaginal delivery, but there are some colleagues who've spoken about weakness in the pelvic floor afterwards and some vaginal trauma. So she's just basically asking about strengthening and Kegels, and women basically don't talk about it. Does it change? So yes, I mean, I think it would be silly to suggest that a vaginal delivery versus a cesarean has different impacts on the body and the pelvic floor muscles. But remember, when you have been pregnant, right, your entire pelvis has had to make space for a growing fetus for 9 months. So whether at the end of the day you have a cesarean or vaginal delivery, there are some changes in your pelvis, in your pelvic floor, that will be there regardless of how eventually that fetus leaves your body. And so definitely Kegel exercises, which are the strengthening exercises for your pelvic floor, doing yoga, using the ball. You guys know that ball, the exercise ball or the aerobics ball. You can tell I never use it. You know, and issues of posture, how you are sleeping when you're pregnant, you know, pillow support, taking nice relaxing walks while you are pregnant. All of those things are important. And remember, your pelvic floor muscles will still cope better with pregnancy and birthing if you had already good, strong pelvic muscles. And so don't wait for you to get pregnant first and then start to live healthy or being interested in wellness. And so, you know, I always say, even people who want to get pregnant, start taking the vitamins before you get pregnant. Start eating well before you get pregnant. Stop smoking before. Stop drinking before. So that by the time you get pregnant, the quality of the egg is good. Your body is already in a good space, and therefore you are able to best tolerate some of the pregnancy changes. And so, yeah. And someone is asking about the UN role. The UN role is honorary. I'm an independent expert, so I'm not representing the UN. I'm not an employee of the UN. And as an independent expert, it's important to know that it's an honorary position. And so, yeah, that's what it is. And I'm looking forward to see how that role, you know, develops and morphs and changes. And, you know, that I'm in it now, obviously. You know, I bring my own lived experience, and my lens, you know, through the world is one of being a Black woman, and that is the experience and the lived reality of this person who's the currently incumbent as the special rapporteur. And yeah, so I look forward to that a lot. So that was the thread, and so thank you very much, guys, for entertaining and playing along and answering my thread. I hope that you will, you know, continue to engage and ask your questions even after this, and then maybe we'll have a themed one, right? So that when you ask your questions, it's based on a theme. But I'm glad that you found the time and the space to play along with me, And thank you and good night.